Hi everybody, thank you for watching this video, for joining me here. This is a little bit of maybe a little bit more boring one for the Indigo Sky vlog channel, but I wanted to make a new video on home education versus homeschooling. I have another video on my Indigo Sky Holistic YouTube channel. I was going to transfer that over here and I thought, no, actually I'll just make a brand new one here, but I will link that here somewhere so that you can go and watch that on my Indigo Sky Holistic YouTube channel. So for anyone who's new joining me here, I'm Davina Ketson. I am the face behind Holistic Support Services of Indigo Sky Holistic. I am a intuitive healer and holistic therapist. That is my livelihood, but I'm also a home educating, unschooling mum of 3. And this channel is more of the unschooling, vlogging life as a self-employed home educating mum, a wife, looking after a home, all the other bits that are not just my holistic stuff. Because there's so much more to Indigo Sky than that. So, but I wanted to make a video to discuss really the differences between home education and homeschooling, and why I think it's really, really important that there is a difference and that we define that difference, particularly whilst things are in this weird sort of interim period of changing the systemic organizations and structures of the world into more conscious ones. So I'm a spiritual intuitive as well as a holistic therapist. So I'll just put a proviso on here that I'm coming at this from a consciousness spiritual point of view as well. So take what resonates, leave the rest, all that jazz. Because I think that there's a big difference between the consciousness of humanity now and the consciousness of humanity when things like the Education Act of 1870 or whatever it is came into place. And the things that are very like physical aspects of our systems in the world right now, or how they have been from like previous decades to where we are now, where we know that the way that control is had over humans, over the people, over the individuals, it has got to change, because it's actually holding us back from being true and authentic to ourselves. So yeah, home education, homeschooling, it ends up being quite a emotive subject sometimes. I've been called out for correcting people and saying it's home education here in the UK and it's home education for a reason, and that's because that's what the law says it is, and it's not homeschooling. And to differentiate the two, because in some parts of the world there is homeschooling, it has to be a much more structured curriculum based way of educating. But also why I think that in this rising of human consciousness, even if you are in a country where you have to follow more local authority regulation, more governmental regulation, that actually referring to what you do at home with your young people as education is a really, really significant way of raising your frequency around what you do and how you teach your young people. So a little bit of background on me. I'm a home educating mum. I have 2 teenagers and a not quite 10-year-old. So I've been home educating for their whole life. We never did school at all. I knew when I was pregnant with my eldest that I would home educate, and that impact came from my previously home educated eldest nephew. So my sister also home educated her 3 boys, and I have 3 girls. She's always will always amuse me, I think, for the rest of our lives. Her 2 older boys went to school, and she withdrew them from school between 8 and 9, or around 8 and 9, because the schools where they lived in the UK, in the city, weren't really something that she felt her ADHD at the time. That's what they thought. My eldest nephew is ADHD. He has I think at last recall, I think he's actually got an Asperger's diagnosis. He's like quite a bit older now. I won't embarrass him by saying how old he is, but he's a grown man with offspring of his own. And at the time he was about 9 and diagnosed with ADHD. And the idea of school, it turned out that it was making him physically ill, going to school, and because his mum and home was a safe space for him, he would then let go of all of what he'd held within himself when he got home, and that was where the ADHD diagnosis came from, I believe, to the best of my recollection. I was about 16, 17 when she took her boys out of school. So I was just leaving the education system as she took her boys out of the education system. And I will admit now, and I always do, that I thought she was insane. Like, I literally thought it just ticked another box of the insanity that I thought she was, because she'd been breastfeeding, co-sleeping, like full-term breastfeeding mum. She was co-sleeping and room sharing, and I just was like, this is crazy. Mattresses on the floor for her 2 older boys in the bedroom, and I was just like, no, I would never do any of that. I did all that and more. And when she took her boys out of school, I was just leaving the education system, and I came, like, I don't think I voiced this to her at the time, but the next few years I was like, they don't socialise, they like don't read, they don't do this, they don't do that. I was a very, very judgmental teenager, early 20s, like thought I were just like ruining their lives. I began to see things slightly differently by the time the eldest was doing his GCSEs, and he self-studied to do GCSEs whilst his dad ended up in quite a serious car accident. His mum and dad, but his dad was in intensive care for a little while and ended up with a serious injury to his leg that he continued to have long-term issues with. And I was a little bit like, wow, actually, he's really smart and he's really self-motivated. And meanwhile, my youngest nephew, who'd not learned to read until he was 8, was like, actually, when he did learn to read, it was very much like that. There was no slow progression into spelling out words and like reading one word at a time. He seemed to go very quickly from, to my awareness, not really being able to read, to actually full on reading adult, like not adult books, but like things, well, back at the time, things like Bible passages, because that was a big part of our lives back then. And I was genuinely surprised because I didn't see the progression through reading that I thought had to be done. It was very, very interesting to observe. Fast forward a little bit more, and I'm pregnant, and in the city thinking, oh my god, this precious little unborn baby didn't know her gender at the time. Like, I don't want it to go to any of these schools here. They're all horrible. This is like, this is a nightmare. And no prospects at the time to leaving the area as well. We did actually leave the area before she was born. Not before she was born, before she was school age. But it was very interesting at the time. Observing like the schools and things. And it was my eldest nephew, while we were discussing this at the dinner table, who was like, don't send her to school. Don't send it to school. If you're watching this, Kate, I didn't really refer to you as it. So yeah. And I was like, And he pointed out that him and his brothers hadn't gone to school, or that him and his next brother had been taken out of school, and his youngest brother had never been to school. And at this point, he'd graduated college, I think, at the time. I'm not sure he was quite graduated university, and I think maybe then that point my middle nephew was in university. They all have graduated university, and they have all got high level education. And it was very interesting to me. There he is going, don't send it to school. I was like, that's interesting. And my husband and I discussed it. And my husband had been, like, my husband's creative and artistic, and he felt like that hadn't been allowed to flourish at school. I'd been a little bit bullied at school and hadn't particularly enjoyed school, which was why it was crazy that I thought my sister was crazy for taking it boys out of school, because it wasn't like I'd love school and thought it was the best years of my life or anything like that. I was like, none of that. And so that was the decision made pretty much about 6 months pregnant with my eldest. They'll not go to school. And that was the end of that. Like, it just never, then school just never came into my, like, awareness. So she was about 4, and we'd go to play groups that involved walking through a school, and she'd see girls that she knew, and she'd be like, I want to go to school, and I'm like, yeah. And even if you go to school, you're not going to this one, so nah. And eventually, actually, through playing school with some other friends that she had who went to school, that was when she was like, yeah, no, I don't want to go to school. My middle one never really wanted to go to school because she didn't want to be told what to do. Although academically she'd thrive in the school environment, she wouldn't cope very well with being told what to do and how to do it and when to do it. Neurospicy household and all that. She's not very good at being told what to do. So that's my history with home education, and here I am now. I've got 2 teenagers. By definition, if you want to define it, we unschool. We'd be called radical unschoolers because we don't actually have defined set times for anything. We don't do bedtimes, we don't do meal times, we don't do labels around food, we don't do like limits on screen time. We just don't, we're radical unschoolers. And that's not been without its like hiccups or without its wobbles. And there's been times where I've had to lay some rules for my own sanity, and there have been times where I've had to lay down rules around the tech because it was getting damaged. And not because they were like throwing it against walls or anything like that, but purely because using it plugged in would have like ruined the charge ports. And eventually I was like, look, they have to be plugged in like while you're not using them. And then we have, we turn the Wi-Fi off at night. So then there's like situations where then they obviously like, you've got no Wi-Fi, you've got no data, you can't use it. So they're like they're life experiences. These are the things that us as adults have to deal with. I have to deal with if my phone data runs out because I've not used it wisely. Look, I have no data. Lesson learned. And that's, to me, that's how you learn through life. And so they're like the like learning wise use of resources, learning wise use of time is all much better learned through experience than through a teacher saying this is how you learn this, or this is when you do this, or this is when you should do this and that and the other. And as an intuitive healer with experience with intuitive eating, and an advocate to learning to listen to your body, I'm like, meal times, we so structured into what we eat and when we eat and how we eat. That's how we end up overeating, or how we end up like with overly controlled eating habits, or how we end up binge eating or binge drinking, or how we end up binging on screens that we've, because we don't have this self-regulation that we learn. And watching now 3 young girls grow up into their teen years going, yeah, it works on the other side of the intensity of some of it. Now, don't get me wrong, the teen years are a whole different ball game, and that's something that I'm exploring, supporting more people with, both from a holistic therapist point of view and also just generally in an unschooling realm, and with self-directed learning resources. That those years you can find all sorts of resources and support for unconditional parenting, conscious parenting, attachment parenting, whatever label they give it these days, of the younger age groups, babies, toddlers, how to co-sleep, how to breastfeed, how to be feeding on cue, and how to be listening to your intuition as a mum with a tiny baby or a toddler, how to not be controlling and restrictive of them. And then they grow, and there's kind of like this like weird then morphing where that is then teenagers, just they're still teenagers and we still hate them and we still give them all this like negative energy that they are actually such incredible, beautifully wise beings, but because of the way that the developmental stuff that's going on with them, we're not actually aware of that. And I think a lot of that comes then back down to us. But that's a little bit of a tangent on some of that, because it does kind of play into this idea of education and homeschooling, home education. And this is into the point of the video now. Well done for watching all that and coming here. Home education versus homeschooling. So by definition, school technically only happens in a school building. Schooling by definition happens in a structure, an organised setting, something that is a school. So forest schools do kind of include that because there's an organisational structure to a forest school. Steiner schools, Montessori schools, there's a structure to that and how it's expected to be run. And also the teachers are qualified in particular areas. You know, generally you get a qualified Steiner teacher or you get a qualified forest school teacher. They're teachers and they're qualified to something, some level by a authority, education board, whatever. Education happens anywhere. We're all being educated by something at some time. Pretty much everybody at some point in their life is still being educated in some way. So education happens everywhere, anywhere, anytime. That's education. So I'm just going to have a quick share of the definitions, excuse me, of the words. So education by definition is the act or process of educating or being educated. Knowledge that's obtained through a learning process. That's education. And that is a thing that can happen anywhere, anytime. Doesn't need to be like in a building. It doesn't need to be from a book. You can be educated by going and watching a video. You can be educated by talking to somebody who knows something. You can go and sit and learn from them. They may not be a teacher. They may not be qualified in anything. You may just be learning because of their life story. And that is like a really vast difference between education and schooling. Schooling, by definition, is the act of learning in a school setting, and usually follows a curriculum or a learning process. And if we get into the etymology of the word school, it's like it has roots in the army. The word military in the military, and what's this say? My etymology online. Troop, multitude, coming from the school of fish type of definition of it. Schools are buildings. So if you are in a country where you are expected to report to the local authority by like obligation, if you live in a country where there is like a checking in system, and there are regulations and rules within the UK where the local authority may ask for reports, but as a mum or dad, you're not obligated to inform the local authority that you are going to home educate. I'll come to the Act in a minute, the UK Education Act, that and what it states in a second. So, if you are anywhere in the world educating outside of a school, you're kind of home educating, or life learning, or world learning. I don't even like the term world schooling, because it again gives off this energy of like following the masses, of the military aspect of school. So for anyone who doesn't know, school has its base in training armies. Now, lots of people don't know that. That is where modern day school, the Western idea of school, comes from. It comes from the Prussian model of army training, and it was brought to places like the UK to allow families where the parents went to work in the factories to have some type of childcare. It was childcare provision so that the workers could go do their jobs in the factories, and to create structure and order in the young people as they grew up into adults, so they knew how to go and work in the factory, because it's a very different concept to the maybe more freedom approach that someone who's on a farm might have. Someone who's got a more freedom orientated way of life has. And that isn't to say that when you have that freedom way of life, you can't then go and be in a structured setting. And this is what my experience has been through the many years I've been around unschooling, watching my nephews go from the unschooling life at home to college, where they may have had certain aspects of academic subjects where they needed a little bit more tutoring through early on, but once they'd like, this is the book, this is what you'll need to learn, this is what you should know, and add a little bit of teaching. Because there's nothing wrong with teaching, there's nothing wrong with a learning experience, there's nothing wrong with being shown and taught things. It's more to do with the one-size-fits-all nature that the education system tends to be. It's flawed because not one of us is like the same as somebody else. We're all very unique, and I think this is where there's acknowledgement now that within most education systems around the world, there's not, like, they can't possibly keep the structure and have it supporting every individual's diverse way of processing information. And it causes from a holistic therapist point of view, masses and masses of traumas, of self-esteem issues, of feeling like you're not good enough, of not ever, like, those who excel academically and have the like capacity to remember and retain information, but sit in an exam and panic sets in and they actually fail their exams. This has been known for like decades, that some young people fare really well in an exam setting. They work well under pressure. Others just don't. They have the knowledge, they have the information, they can give you an essay on something, or they can talk to you about something, but you sit them there in a silent room with a piece of paper in front of them and they just like, what is this? And I know from my time at school that there were, like, I was okay, I didn't mind exams, I didn't mind the pressure, and I didn't mind the retaining the information of the subjects that I was interested in, like, to be fair. And this is the thing with home education generally, is the freedom that it gives young people to learn what interests them, and to learn then the other stuff through learning what interests them. And I always get asked, how do they learn to read if you don't teach them? And I'm like, how did your baby learn to walk if you didn't teach them? How did your baby learn to talk if you didn't teach them? They learn to read because the world is full of the opportunities to read. You give them something they're interested in and they want to learn more about it, they'll learn to read. Unless there's like a particular issue like dyslexia that may be stopping them from actually easily learning to read. And that is something that literally eventually will come to the fore. Eventually you'll come to the conclusion that actually there's, at 10, 11, 12 and they're still not able to clearly recognize the characters and read, then maybe there's a problem. I would say from my experience with home education is that the average age of learning to read is 7. So within my own family, I've got someone who is reading at 4 and someone who is reading at nearly 9. They're all now very fluent readers and read well above their like age level expected to read type of thing. And then I would give the example of my nephew was 8 when he was reading, and like, totally understand it's scary when they're not reading, when that's what we're used to, but a lot of this process as well is deschooling and deconditioning ourselves and unschooling ourselves. This is where I'm going with supporting mums and dads now from a self-directed point of view, is unschooling ourselves so that we can trust the young people in our care to be self-directed in their interests, to learn and follow their interests and still be highly educated. Like, you don't have to go to school to graduate university with high honours. You have to go to university. But again, by definition, if you look at the definitions of within the Education Act, university isn't a school. It's very interesting. We tend to call them schools, or at least I think in America they often refer to it as school. It's a very interesting point of view. So just to touch then on the Education Act here in the UK, I have it again. And this is where why the definition is really, really important here in the UK, particularly. Not to get caught in the trap that local authorities are often putting people in, of like, I believe now you're homeschooling, or the school, or like expect you to say homeschooling. And then the thing is, it becomes normalised so that when people are advertising events, they'll be like, we're calling out to all homeschoolers. And it's like, nobody here is homeschooling. They're just not. Because the Education Act and the laws around education in the UK state it's the duty of parents to secure education of children of compulsory school age. And here in the UK or in England, Wales and Scotland, I think it's age 5 to 18, and within Northern Ireland it's age 4 to I believe 18. And there's like they've got to be in school or being educated till 16, and then from 16 to 18 they're some leeway with vocational type qualifications, apprenticeships, college, A-levels. It's like it's just expected that some form of education be carrying on till 18, as I understand it. That changed somewhere in the last few years. And so the Education Act states that the parent of every child of compulsory school age shall cause him to receive efficient full-time education suitable to A, his age, ability and aptitude. Again, that's why school doesn't work, because that, like, one 7-year-old is very different from another 7-year-old, is very different from another 7-year-old in their ability and aptitude. Some 5-year-olds are like well up there with the reading, and other 5-year-olds just still want to be like playing. They're not interested in a book whatsoever, and when they're forced into it or pressured into it, I know home educated young people who were so put off reading from the ages of 4 to 6 that they then told themselves they couldn't read, and then like actually when taken out and removed from the school system and given some freedom, actually ended up excelling at it. So that's that one. And then B, to any special educational needs that they have, and that might be special educational needs in regards to neurospicy. It may also be special educational needs in the fact that they're like really, really intelligent and really got deep interests. Again, it would be a likely neurospicy type scenario where they highly intelligent and remember one thing, they can recite facts on one thing, but you stick something else in front of them and they appear to be like clueless on that subject. Maths and English being the two obvious ones where there can be like oftentimes you're into one or the other, or you excel at one but not the other oftentimes. And then it says finally, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. So the Education Act is stating that it's the parents' responsibility that every child of compulsory school age be in full-time education, either at school or otherwise. The full-time education, not full-time school. It's right there in the Act. You don't have to be in full-time school. You're in full-time education, either at school or otherwise. And that is that. That's why it's home education. Here in the UK, I'm not going to go and look at all the education acts from all over the world. I do think if you're a more consciously minded, responsible caregiver of young people, a mum, a dad, guardian, a grandmother or grandfather, whatever your role is with the young people in your care, maybe you are a teacher, consciously minded teacher of some kind, to know that you're educating and not schooling, it just opens up a much wider, vaster potential of learning experience, because school gets very small. It's like, I often get asked still, do we have to sit down between 9 and 3 with school books at a table, and how am I going to do that as a full-time working mum or dad? And I'm like, the reality is, in a classroom full of 30 pupils, there has to be that length of time for the education to take place, because you've got disruption, you've got 30 different young people who need attention. One or two or maybe three teachers can't give 30 pupils the attention that they require to learn to the extent that they need. What it takes a class of 30 to be taught in 2 hours, one young individual of the same age can be taught by one adult in a matter of 30 minutes to 60 minutes. What might take a whole day to teach a group of 30. And then they can be either left to study for themselves. They can be left, if they're really young still, to play. I was reading an article in, I think it was on MSN News, about Joe Wicks, is it, who's took his 4-year-old daughter, he's decided to home educate his 4-year-old daughter, and some journalist was going on about she can't rip her 5-year-old's toys zebra from him to get him to sit and read. And I'm like, why are you ripping your kids' toys from them in the first place? Why are you why do people think a 5-year-old should be learning to read and not playing? That's how messed up the mentality of young people need to go to school from 5 to 16 to learn. Child psychologists will tell you learning through play, the early years teaching is supposed to now be play focused. This is why in many countries in the world they don't actually start academic learning till the age of 7. I think the average age is 6 or something for the academic learning. That is the 3 R's, because learning through play is, and even playful is my word of the year this year, and some of the books that I've picked out to read through the year around play are all about how we as adults don't know how to play, and because we don't know how to play, we actually don't know how to learn, because we're so caught in this notion of this is how we learn through sitting at a desk and reading a book and doing an exam, and that's actually you can actually much more retain information when you get to play or create in some way. There we go. That's my little piece. That's my little piece on home education versus homeschooling. Please do let me know what you think in the comments around this, particularly if you have young people who you're looking to bring from school, particularly if you don't live in the UK, and you know, how do you feel about this idea of, if you are homeschooling somewhere like America, how do you feel about this idea of dropping the notion of school from your vocabulary in regards to educating your young people? Please do all the things that YouTube likes you to do. Like, comment and subscribe. And be sure to check out some of my other videos on the channel. And I will see you another time in another video. I think I'm overdue a vlog. I'll see if I can vlog another day, one day, sometime soon. Maybe I'll vlog a day coming here. I've got one of my girls with me today. She's downstairs in the cafe, drawing, I believe. Digital art is her thing. All art is her thing, but she's digital arting it today, here. And the other's about to go to her self-directed youth club, which is part of the Esteemed Creatives branch here in West Yorkshire, which is where you can also find support from me as a mum or dad if your young people attend any of the esteemed events. So I might link some of that as well down in the description. Who knows? Anyway, and if you'd like to explore any of this with me more fully, I will be creating some support packages and processes for mums and dads and caregivers of young people of all ages very soon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.